This session is sponsored by Agricultural Solutions. Dr. Kristine Nichols is a leader in the movement to regenerate soils with healthy food, people, and a planet. For healthy food, people, and a planet. Her current focus is exploring the similarities between the soil and gut microbes by looking at the carbon key. Chris believes in a strong health foundation built through the identification of biological methods, tools, practices that reduce pest issues, soil erosion, fossil fuel use, and greenhouse gas emissions, and how to build the systems that are resilient by increasing the nutrient and water use efficiencies while providing long-term solutions to agriculture, economic viability, food insecurity, and the loss of the ecosystem services. She continues to develop and evolve methodology and tools farmers can use to examine and appreciate their soil. Throughout her career, she has given over 250 invited presentations. When it says that, I wonder if there was 250 that weren't invited. I'm not sure. We'll figure this out here. But authored and co-authored more than 25 peer-reviewed publications and has numerous videos online. Dr. Nichols was the chief scientist at Rodale Institute from 2014 to 2018, where she oversaw organic research trials, including the farming systems trial, the longest running side-by-side U.S. study comparing conventional chemical agriculture and organic biologically based methods. Prior to joining Rodale, Dr. Nichols was a research soil microbiologist with the USDA Ag Research Services for 11 years, where she focused on mycorrhizal fungi and the investigation of, I'm not sure if I've said this word before, glomalin, a substance produced by fungi. Glomalin contributes to the nutrient cycling by protecting AM hyphae, transporting nutrients from the soil to the plant and soil structure and plant health by helping to form and stabilize soil aggregates. Chris received her Bachelor of Science degrees in plant biology and in genetic cell biology from the University of Minnesota. I'll never read out the year on people like this because I'm told that's not polite to do. And environmental microbiology from Western Virginia University and a PhD in soil science from the University of Maryland. In recognition of her work, Dr. Nichols has received several awards, including the 2012 Conservation Research Award for International Soil and Water Conservation Society. Please join me in welcoming a very well-rounded presenter here for us.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here. I walk around, so unlike Derek and Tanis, I'm going to kind of be moving around a little bit, and I'm a little bit nervous having followed Derek and Tanis because they did such a tremendous job, and as a research scientist, it's also very difficult for me sometimes because I think that I talk about many things that are difficult sometimes to visualize and see, and sort of the impractical of some things, which are becoming more practical, but it's great to be able to see it in a real world practical landscape that Derek and Tanis are utilizing that. And it's been my privilege over the years to be able to work with innovative farmers. So I'm very happy to be here speaking with innovative farmers, working with innovative farmers that are putting these tools into place and being able to see some of these things that are happening in our systems. And really what we're trying to do is regenerate our systems. This is very much a systems approach to how it is that we're going to be looking at things. It isn't going out there and figuring out what is the individual tool that you can use and it's going to solve your problem. None of this stuff is wizardry or instantaneous solutions. This is all about building up a system. This is all about looking at these different mechanisms and how they all work together. And I put the carbon key here because really what I'm going to be talking about is this whole idea of carbon. Because I believe, and I'm going to talk about it several times, I believe that we have one problem in agriculture. Just one. You guys have a lot of issues. I understand that. My dad is a farmer in southwestern Minnesota. I've worked with farmers in North Dakota. I've worked with some Canadian farmers over the years. I've worked with farmers in the Southern Plains. I've worked with farmers on the East Coast. I've worked with farmers in many areas in the US and in several areas throughout the world. And all throughout the world, no matter where you are, there are issues and challenges. I get it. My dad, I love him to death. He's owned the farm since the year that I was born. Not going to say what year that was, but he's owned the farm since the year that I was born, and he's been in agriculture all of my life, obviously, and even before that, multi-generation farming, and it's never a perfect year. Something's always wrong. There's issues. You do this, you do that. It was too cold, it was too hot, it was too wet, it was too dry. You didn't get the fertilizer applied at the right time. You couldn't get planting in at the right time. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. So there's always issues. But the thing is those are issues. Those are challenges. The problem is that we don't have enough carbon in our soils. You solve that problem, and as Derek and Tanis were talking about, you build up resilience to be able to thrive when you are challenged by those issues. That's what it is that you're trying to do, is build up resilience to thrive when you are challenged. Not put Band-Aids on the issues that it is that you see. We're going to try and solve the problem. And so in solving the problem, it isn't about focusing on what it is that you take off. It isn't about focusing on yields. It's about focusing, again, on building that resilience up. It's about focusing on maximizing the efficiencies that exist in the system. It's about focusing on soil. It's about focusing on how the soil is going to be able to function in that system, what it is that's going to be able to add to that system. And I'm talking about things that we've known since well before 400 BC. This is not new stuff. This is stuff that we need to tap into, this knowledge that has been existing for a very long time. And when we do this, we can build up that health of the soil. And we're talking about the health of the soil. This is the accepted definition of soil health. But what I want to focus on is this idea of soil function, this continuity, the continuous function of soil, making sure that we have soil that is going to allow for that resiliency and allow for production to thrive, no matter what the conditions are that you're going to be exposed to. And that's going to help us have healthy soil, healthy crops, healthy animals, including ourselves, and a healthy planet. Because again, the soil is the foundation for these systems. It's how this all is going to be functioning. And so this is a good example of the fact that this is what our problem is a carbon problem. So this is from David Brandt's farm in Carroll, Ohio. And basically you have David Brandt's soil, it's the dark rich soil, and his neighbor's soil. According to in the US, the NRCS, Natural Resources Conservation Service, that maps soils, according to NRCS, the soil that is closest to me, that is what David Brandt's soil is. That is how it is mapped. That is how it is classified. What he has done to his soil, how he has regenerated his soil by focusing on the carbon problem, is what it is that we can achieve through innovation. That is what we can do when we focus on the carbon problem. At the Rodale Institute, where I worked for a number of years, we had what the farm looked like in 1970 when the farm was purchased, and what the farm looked like in 2017. Again, regeneration, reinvigoration of that landscape. And what I want to show you over there are some deep core samples that we took. The core samples went down to a full meter, but this is just at the surface. It's not the very near surface. So we're going down about 60 centimeters is the total depth of that core there. But you have the conventional system. These are side-by-side comparisons of conventional chemically managed systems that are very similar to what the soil was looking like in 1970. Hasn't changed much over that time. That's on the column that's closest to me. The column that's further away there, that is in our regenerative system. And so what we've done is not only are we changing the amount of organic matter that we have at the surface, but we're getting organic matter deeper into the soil. And that's very important not just for the fact that we can put more organic matter deeper into the soil and we can improve the structure of that soil deeper down so that we can get water into the soil, hold more water, build structure, all of those types of things, but it also is really important for fertility and nutrient cycling. Because in that zone, it's called the B horizon that's below that A horizon, that B horizon is actually very mineral rich. And if we can get organic matter and biological activity occurring there, we can cycle those nutrients that are in that B horizon and be able to bring those back up to the plants, and be able to cycle that into that system. To be able to grow those nutrients and improve that nutrient density of our soil environment. And how that is going to then get translated into the nutrient density of the crops that we're growing. And be able to resolve this without adding a lot of inputs. Again, this is not an instantaneous solution in solving the carbon problem. And it also is one of those things in which it isn't this thing where the instantaneous solution is going to be, going out there. I tell farmers all the time, I'm a microbiologist. I tell farmers all the time, I said, I can tell you how to maximize the amount of mycorrhizal fungi that you have in your soil. Your brassica mycorrhizal fungi are keystone organisms that you could have in your soil. I can tell you how to maximize that amount, but you're going to go broke. Because everything costs. It's a trade-off analysis. Nothing is free. Anyone who tells you that stuff is free is fooling you. I've got some land in Florida that I'll sell you. That's how we say in the US, and it's usually a swampland in Florida that I'll sell you for that. Basically, the whole idea is I'm not going to sell you a bill of goods and saying that you need to do this or do that in order to be able to get the system functioning. It's about taking a systems approach and recognizing the costs. Again, everything costs. The question that you have to ask yourself is who's going to pay the costs and how big those costs are going to be. We can grow anything anywhere. We can grow stuff on Mars. That isn't the issue. The issue is how much that is going to cost us to be able to do that. What is the cost of the inputs that we have to bring into the system in order to be able to do that? And who has to pay those costs? This is how we take care of our agroecosystems, is looking at it as to who has to pay those costs. When we're looking at, again, this is not about yields, this is about profit margins, it's looking at who's paying the costs and what those costs are that you're going to be paying. So when we look at carbon as this most important element to the system, why is carbon the problem? And I'm not going to go into a lot of chemistry here, but the whole idea is that even though carbon isn't the most abundant element, even though carbon isn't in the highest concentration necessarily on the crust of our planet, carbon is the most important because carbon has, the way that is as an atom, is carbon has this incredible binding capacity. Carbon has this capacity to form all of these different bonds. And that allows for a lot of flexibility. It allows for it to have a lot of different types of activities. And that is the reason why pretty much all life on planet Earth is carbon-based. Every molecule, every cell, every protein, every enzyme in pretty much all life on planet Earth has a carbon backbone to it. And I say pretty much all life because there are silica-based organisms called diatoms. They have a silica-based structure. They actually do use carbon as molecules in energy cycling and activity, but their structure, their physical structure, their bodies are based out of silica. But we're not going to worry about diatoms, so we're just going to mostly focus on carbon. Because when you think about this, again, when we're talking about the carbon problem that we have is the fact that we need to have so much. Think about all of those cells. Think about all of the cells in your body, how much carbon it takes to actually maintain all of those cells. We used to be a carbon economy. That's how everything used to run. And then somehow we took that away, and we took away our thinking. I appreciate that Derek and Tanis talked about the fact that we used to think about the fact that we grew food. Now we think about the fact that we grow commodities. When we start changing the way that we refer to things, it sort of makes us not value them quite as much. When you start telling yourself that you grow food, that has a different value to it in your mind than telling yourself that you grow commodities, that you grow a product. There's a different level of value to that. When we think of ourselves as living in a world that is dominated by a carbon economy, we used to all work for food. On some basic level, we still do. We just took away the actual food trading and replaced it with money. But that is the basics of biology. Every organism needs to eat. We're biologically programmed to eat and reproduce. That is what we are supposed to do. We are biologically programmed to eat and reproduce, and we are biologically programmed to be lazy. Yes, I said that. We are biologically programmed to be lazy. It's called conservation of resources. That's what we'd say scientifically, conservation of resources. Essentially, it's us being lazy. And the better you are at being lazy, the more that you are going to thrive and be able to efficiently utilize carbon resources, food, and reproduce. And that is how these systems are functioning, is basically on a carbon economy, this carbonomics, the carbon currency to the system. And when we solve the carbon problem, we are going to have all of these benefits. We are going to get increases and improvements in biological activity, the growth and diversity of the organisms that you have in the soil. We're going to get improvements in water infiltration, water holding capacity, water efficiency of use, and water quality. The best filters on the planet are carbon-based filters. Air and water filters are carbon-based filters. Why? Because we've learned from the fact that the soil with carbon in it filters chemicals out. That is why we use carbon-based filters. Because carbon has that binding capacity. We improve soil tilth and soil structure, natural fertility, nutrient cycling, nutrient storage. We're improving the ability to absorb pesticides, absorb chemicals into that system. We're decreasing erosion, compaction, and air pollution, all if we manage carbon. That's all you have to do, is think about managing carbon. When I first started working with a number of farmers in North Dakota after I finished college, and I'll tell this story right here because I like to tell stories, obviously. I like to tell stories. I'll tell this story because this kind of fits in as well. So when I was in college, I started at the University of Minnesota as an undergrad, started studying microbiology, and we said that we knew maybe about 10% of the organisms that were in the soil. We could culture them, identify them, we knew what they were, we knew what they did. By the time I finished graduate school, roughly about 12 years later, we decided that we knew about 0.1%. So I went to 12 years of school to become 100 times stupider. So you can go ahead and blame the organizing committee and Mel and everybody for inviting me, because you basically invited a speaker that just admitted that she took 12 years of education to learn that she was 100 times stupider than when she started. Since I've had education since then, and I can guarantee that I'm about 1,000 to maybe 1,000,000 times stupider than when I started. Because what it is that we're constantly learning how this system is functioning and what is happening in these systems and how involved and intricate they are. And so when I first went to North Dakota and I first started working with farmers, I thought that I kind of knew it all, and I thought that I knew how to tell them what to do and where to go and what to plant and how to have things happen. And I didn't understand that this whole entire carbon system and network and carbon economy was out there, and how to tap into that and how to get that to function. And so that is what I want you to do, is I want you to challenge to think about, to change your thinking and change your focus, admitting to these things that it is that you don't know. Because what it really boils down to is that all life is interrelated, that we're caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny, and whatever affects one destiny affects all indirectly. We're all a part of a system. We're all a part of an interactive carbon economy, where you have plants that are trading carbon to fungi and bacteria, things like mycorrhizal fungi, this relationship where you have the strands of fungal hyphae, their thread-like bodies that are going to go out there into the soil and be able to get nutrients that the plants need and bring those back, transport those back to the roots of the plant. And they're going to do that in exchange for carbon. You're going to have things like rhizobium bacteria and other nitrogen-fixing bacteria. We have both free-living, asymbiotic, and symbiotic nitrogen fixers. We don't think about that. We have bacteria that solubilize phosphorus. We have organisms that work together to create aggregates, to create these pellets in our soil. We have nematodes and protozoa that are going to be eating bacteria and fungi, and in the process releasing nitrogen and other nutrients that are needed by the plants. We have microarthropods that are going to help to be able to shred organic matter into little pieces so that bacteria and fungi can consume them. All of these things, all of these organisms working together on this carbon trading economy. Again, it's who pays who and what the costs are in order to be able to get these rewards from that system. Because what we really want to do is build up the resilience in the system. We want to create a system in which we are not going to be challenged as much by insects and disease pests and pressures, where we're not going to be challenged as much by weed pressures. We're not going to have declines in yield because of those pressures. So as we look at various types of thresholds that we can get to, sometimes, and part of the reason that I wanted to show this of building up resilience is part of this is not always about saying that our response to this has to be remove everything from the ecosystem that could possibly put us under pressure. Part of this is actually about putting out challenges on those plants. Because we need to build up resilience. You don't build up resilience by babying and coddling an organism. The Olympics just recently ended. Basically, we want our agro-ecosystems to function like gold medal winning Olympic athletes. That's what we want. If you want to be a gold medal winning Olympic athlete, you can't be an athlete that gets babied and coddled, that gets nutrients fed to it on a continuous basis, that gets everything that it needs, that makes sure that if it needs water, it gets fed water, that it makes sure that if it has any minor pest pressure, that pest pressure is eliminated. That's not what's going to be able to get these systems to thrive. That's not what's going to get these systems to build up resilience. So we need to work with the soil food web to get this to function. And Tanis put up a different kind of image of the soil food web, but it was a very similar image of the soil food web. And a lot of people focus on the organisms that are part of the food web. And I think that that's a really cool idea, but part of the issue is that we miss the fact that without that first trophic level, there is no food web. If we don't have carbon going into the system, if you don't have the photosynthetic process, you don't have a food web. If there's no food, there's no web. It's the way it works. On some level, this again is incredibly simple, but incredibly complex in the diversity that exists in this ecosystem. So you have a huge diversity of organisms. This is a diagram of the tree of life. Essentially, you have organisms in the soil that are representative of pretty much every branch off of this tree of life. What this does is this allows for a lot of resilience and redundancy of function. Meaning that if your soils are too salty, you have halophiles that can come in and function. If it's too cold or it's too hot, you'll have other organisms that can have function. If it's too cold, you have psychrophiles. If it's too hot, you have thermophiles. Whatever the condition is, you have an organism that's going to be able to do this. And these may be microscopic organisms, but they are the largest organisms on planet Earth. Yes, I did not take drugs. The largest organisms in the world are microscopic. Seems like a very weird thing. Their individual threads, their individual bodies, their individual cells are microscopic, just like you. Your individual cells are microscopic. But you can be seen in a macroscopic world. When we see fungal hyphae in the soil, that is thousands of threads, of individual threads of fungal hyphae that are wrapped together. When you see that, because the individual threads are microscopic. But they have a very important role on the macroscopic world. Because you have this huge diversity of organisms. And these organisms are doing a number of different things. You have in the middle there, on the other side, you have these nematodes. I think I don't have the remote that has the pointer, but you have the nematodes there that have nematodes that are trapped by a fungus. So you see that fungus there, that thread that forms a loop. And that loop then, in that loop, that fungus will give off exudates that tell the nematode that there's food there. And it'll give off those exudates, the nematode will grow through that loop. Once it goes through that loop, the fluid that's in the surrounding cells will move towards that loop, towards the cells in that loop, and that'll cause those cells to swell. And that'll close that loop. And essentially then the fungus gives off enzymes that break down and kill that nematode and eat that nematode. You have natural predator and prey relationships that are keeping organisms in check, making sure that quote-unquote pests don't get out of control. Pests, for the most part, is our thinking, is our management. We are the masters of our own disasters. We have created a system that allows for pests and diseases to thrive. Nature does not want that to occur. Nature is constantly controlling pests and disease populations. But what we will do is we will make sure that one population is going to grow to a higher level than another population by the way that we manage it. In particular, when we don't have diversity in the crops that we're growing. So then you're breeding certain populations of organisms and not enough of the others. Most organisms that are causing pest and disease issues actually have a saprophytic phase and a parasitic phase. Not all of them, but most of them. Meaning that they would eat something that's dead or they'd eat something that's living. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm going to have to eat something, I'd rather eat something that's dead and not going to attack me back than eat something that's living and going to attack me. So I'm not going to want to cause a plant disease when that plant is going to attack me. But if I'm competing for food and that's all the food that I have, because I got fed, myself and all of my other siblings got fed and we got to reproduce, and now there was, billions of us, and we're all competing against each other for food. It's either eat something that attacks me or die. I'm going to eat something that attacks me. Again, we create these issues in the system. When all that we really have to do with the system is think about the system in the same way that we want to think about how we would like to treat ourselves. Treat the soil like you're supposed to treat yourself. It's a living thing. So you're supposed to treat yourself in such a way, they're all starving and homeless. That's what the organisms are. You're supposed to treat yourself in such a way, you go to the doctor and the doctor says you're not healthy. And I can pretty much guarantee that for most of us in this room, the doctor's going to say you're not healthy. I know you're Canadian and I'm from the US, and if I'm in the US, I can guarantee that if you go to the doctor's going to say you're not healthy. So I'm not going to say that Canadians are the same way, but I think that you're probably pretty close. The doctor's going to say you're not healthy, and the doctor's going to say that you need to change your diet. We're supposed to be eating a consistent diet. You're supposed to eat small meals throughout the day. What do we do to our soil? We grow a cash crop that is putting carbon into our soil for a very short window of time. Now, I recognize, again, you're challenged by a short growing season. But as Derek and Tanis were talking about, that doesn't have to be the excuse. We put limits on ourselves. When we put limits on ourselves, we're limited. The minute you tell yourself you can't do something, you're never going to do it. The minute that you allow your challenges to control you, you are controlled. You're never going to go anywhere. You're innovative farmers. I've been with farmers all of my life. And the thing with farmers is by nature, you're innovators. You're tinkerers. You like to play with things. You like to come up with new ideas. You like to test concepts. You like to test things. You like to do those innovations. So this is the approach that we need to have as we look at the organisms that are in our soils, as we look at trying to manage between 5,000 and 20,000 pounds per acre of organisms that need to be fed. Think about that. This is basically like saying that you would want to have roughly somewhere around, about 15 or so in a healthy soil. You'd want to have about 15 cows on an acre that you're going to feed every day, all day long. How many guys that raise cattle think that you could feed 15 cows per acre every day, all day long? Anybody? Anybody want to take that? This is why we have a carbon problem. Because the biology is demanding that we do this. To have a healthy system, this is what it is that we need to do, is feed that equivalent. We need to get that much carbon into our soils. We need to get that cycling that's going to be happening in that system. Because we have systems in which we want to be able to resolve these issues. And to resolve these issues, as they were talking about, there's several principles that people have put together. And I've sort of added a few of them, and I've added a little bit of some language to some of them, because what I want to focus on is this whole idea of how this affects adding, keeping, or diversifying carbon. We've come up with a lot of different approaches and a lot of different principles to being able to get healthy soil. And there's been a lot of focus on minimizing soil disturbance and tillage and reducing tillage in the system. And I think that tillage and reducing tillage is a very big key to be able to do this. But when it comes to solving the carbon problem, we didn't focus on the problem. Tillage is about a Band-Aid on an issue. It's about stopping erosion, and it's about stopping carbon loss. We didn't focus on the problem. We focused on the Band-Aid. We focused on the issue. The thing with tillage alone is you can't put carbon in the soil with a piece of iron. You have to have a living plant to do that. So maximizing, that's why I put maximizing living roots at the top. Because the more you have a living plant doing photosynthesis, the better off you're going to be. Again, treating the soil like you want to treat yourself. Treating the soil like you're supposed to treat yourself. The doctor says you're supposed to have small meals throughout the day. Maximizing living roots. Making sure that those organisms are getting fed consistently throughout the year. I had a colleague who did research in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Grand Forks, North Dakota is near the Manitoba border. So basically one of the coldest places. It's in the plains, one of the coldest places in continental North America, because it's basically in the exact center of the continent. So there is no moderation that you get from being near coast or near large bodies of water. Essentially, went out there in a potato field, so in a bare field, in the middle of winter, to find out if there was any microbial activity. I said we need to feed the equivalent of about 15 cows 24/7, 365. And you're saying, well, I'm in Canada, basically I have 9 months of winter, so really I don't really, well, maybe you have 11 months of winter, so really I only need to feed the soil about 1 month a year, right? That's your common excuse to things on why you don't have as much of a carbon problem as somebody else does. So she went out there to find that out. Guess what? There are organisms growing at that time. There's biological activity in the middle of winter, in January, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, on bare soil. It's not supposed to happen. Sub-zero temperatures, the soil's frozen. This isn't supposed to occur. But we know that it does, because these organisms are resilient, because they're diverse. So they need to get fed. So we need to make sure that we have the maximum amount of living plants growing, putting carbon in the soil as much as we possibly can. One of the things that Derek and Tanis, now we got that, Derek and Tanis talked about was the fact that things really started to thrive when they started putting in cover crops and the companion crops and all of these things that as they added that carbon, that was the things that made the difference. And then as they added the diversity to that system, Those are the things that are making the difference. That's going to be adding and diversifying the carbon that's in the soil. Reducing the amount of chemical inputs that you have into the system. Again, everything costs. It's a trade-off analysis. The organisms that are in the soil need to do a job. If you want to be a gold medal winning athlete, if you want your soil to function like a gold medal winning athlete, you can't have a soil in which the same amount of work is required all the time. An athlete doesn't run the same distance every day for the same time. They either run faster or they run longer. They don't lift the same weights. They don't, whatever it is, they put a certain amount of stress on the system. They have to put a little bit of a challenge. They have to do work. The biology has to do a job. Much of the job of the biology involves nutrient cycling. Directly or indirectly, they are in the process, many of them, of either freeing up nutrients or delivering those nutrients to the plant or helping to create a better structure of the soil so nutrient movement can happen more efficiently. It's what the organisms in the soil are doing. If we outsource their job, they don't get fed. If they don't get fed, the system starts to collapse. We're not going to be putting carbon into the soil. The plants don't give off exudates into the soil if they don't need to have the microbes doing a job for them. Again, who pays? If you take the joy of the job from the microbes, you're paying for it. Everything costs, nothing is free. So we want to have reducing the chemical inputs that we have in the system. We want to insert livestock into the system, because livestock are going to be a big part of being able to increase exudation. Going to be a big part of moving more carbon down into that soil environment. And livestock doesn't always just include large animals. It also can include insects. Part of the challenge, again, for an athlete is challenging that athlete by having stressors. Grazing, whether by an animal or by an insect, is a stressor on that system. So that's going to help to keep, and diversify carbon. We talked a little bit about tillage. That's about keeping the carbon that's in the soil. And the other thing is helping to protect the soil and keep that soil covered. Making sure that it's not exposed to the elements of wind and water, so that that soil isn't going to be moving away. So with that, I think we'll take some questions.
I think we're going to save the questions for we have the first group will be in here. Obviously, there was probably more to go for Chris here. So the people that are interested, this will be the room that Chris will start in the breakout sessions. Everybody's got the little pamphlets like this inside. There's one sheet and the main one. If you look at it in the back of the first one, you'll see that we're going to breakout sessions here. It's 11:15, so we're going to start. Room 1 will be microbiology to regenerate the soil. Where's Craig? Put your hand up, Craig. So Craig's going to be the leader of that group, so he's going to stay here. These rooms are all nicely labeled with a big green number on them. Room 2 is the biostrips with Dave McEachran and Dustin Mullock. And where's Woody? Woody's going to be heading there, so just don't leave for a second. But room 3 will be building soil health with Derek and Tanis, and Tyler's going to lead us through that one. Then we're going to have controlled traffic farming with Ryan Marshall and Tony Bockwell. Daryl's going to lead us through that one. And the last one will be room 5 will be equipment modifications with Jeff Strange, and Mike's going to lead that one. Just a couple things before you leave here. You get a chance to go through a bunch of these, so look through and decide what you want to cover in the next day and a half here. When we come back here, the next time we'll be back in this room is 1 o'clock. So you're going to go to your breakout session. When it's done, it's going to be lunch. That lunch is going to be sponsored by CanGrow Crop Solutions. And do I see Tim or Alex from C&M here? Alex, stand up. Everyone's going to see you. Because Alex worked so hard to grind all this flour. You had a stone wheel, didn't you, Alex? There's flour just kind of connecting the genetics from where they start. We were talking, Chris talked about here, not a commodity, it's food. Well, that's exactly what Alex and C&M have done. They've brought some wheat that was one of their varieties. They've gave it to the hotel here to make the bread that would be served at lunch today. So we appreciate that as well. Again, go to your session, lunch. We'll be back in here at 1 o'clock sharp. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing a breakout in here. Okay. Chris.
So I'll just be, well, reintroducing you.
Okay.
I believe you've got a few slides.
Yep.